My name is Jacob Stoops.
And I'm Jeff Luella.
And you're listening to the Page 2 podcast.
This is our podcast about the people of the SEO industry.
We chronicle the real-life stories, experiences, challenges, and advice from some of the most amazing people in the business. In this episode, we chat with Bartosz Góralewicz, CEO of OneLee and co-founder of Elevate. We discuss how he went from going to college to get his master's in psychology to helping his wife rank her photography website to SEO. We also discuss his brief career as an affiliate marketer with some black hat tendencies to transitioning to a true white hat practitioner, founding the first white hat SEO agency in Poland, the difficulty of getting into the English SEO market, founding his companies, specializing in technical SEO and JavaScript SEO. In the news, we talk about the impact of coronavirus on the SEO conference circuit, Google's announcement that they'll be moving to a mobile-first index for the entire web by September 2020, and another Google update that tightens the restrictions on the usage of FAQ schema. Finally, we have a deep dive into the topic of website migrations. So get your popcorn ready as we tell Bartosz's SEO story and have another great roundtable discussion. Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Stoops, and we are back with episode 44 of the Page 2 podcast. And it is a great day today because we've got a great guest. But before we mention that guest, I'm going to mention that we are joined by my co-host, Mr. Jeff Luella. How's it going, Jeff?
Well, it's going great. How are you?
I'm good. Good as always. Good as always. And I don't have any witty banter. I usually just come up with the witty banter on the spot, and I really have nothing today, which means it's a good day for me. And our guests don't have to listen to us talk about the weather or something like that.
I was about to give a weather forecast.
Don't give it.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff lives in a wind tunnel. That's it. End of update. Yeah, and I think I said a couple of episodes ago that, like, when you get down to the weather, that's literally the lowest form of conversation. And I'm so bad at small talk that when I get to the weather, like, after that, I've got nothing. And then the next episode, I led off by talking about the weather and just had to do like a face palm for myself. And now we're talking about the weather more. So we've reached the lowest form of conversation.
Kind of a joke.
And now, in light of that, we're going to move on and we're going to start talking SEO. And we have a guest, and our guest is Mr. Bartosz Góralewicz. Did I say it right? I feel like I butchered that.
You're very close. It's Bartosz Góralewicz. It's very, very good.
Man,
if you guys want to... You did very well. You did very well. I had my favorite is Borat. Someone introduced me as Borat, which was a meme in our Slack channel for months. So so thank you for not doing that. But you did very well.
And I'm gonna take it as you didn't take that as a compliment.
Borat? No, not really. Not after the reaction to it was in the email thread,
right?
And it was rough. A couple of weeks at the office.
Funny movie, probably not be fun to call Borat. Not fun to be called Borat, though.
It was for the first few days. Anyhow, if you guys want to talk about the weather, you should come by to Poland, which is now known for like 7 months of shitty weather, rain, and just darkness outside. There's no snow, nothing, just like London, but just
sounds depressing.
Yeah, it's just the weather over the last few years got really, really shitty here. So this is we can talk about it for like an hour now.
Oh my God. It's like, in Ohio, it's 30 or 20 degrees one day, 50 or 60 the next. So it's literally like we can't just get centered on a common temperature or type of weather. It literally changes from day to day, and it's pretty obnoxious. Anyways, so before we kind of get into the meat of the podcast, again, I like to mention we're a growing podcast, and we thank our audience for listening. And over the course of time, more and more people listening. We're very, very happy. And I think when we get to the end of this season, we'll talk about kind of what our growth goals for this podcast were, because we're obliterating them, and we thank you for that. But
Nice.
we are a small, little engine that could sort of podcast, the working man's podcast in SEO. And what I would say is, if you're a first-time listener, you may not know kind of what the core of the podcast is. So I'm going to explain it to you. So the core of the podcast, and this podcast started about 1.5 years ago, and it was primarily because I wanted to have Jake, wanted to have a voice in the industry, but I'm a terrible and slow writer. So I didn't like the idea of blogging, because I just didn't feel like I'm not going to be able to keep up with that. But I also have a creative itch, and I said, okay, I want to do something. And I thought, okay, podcasting sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll start my own podcast. But then when I decided, okay, I'm going to take the leap and I'm going to start a podcast, because podcasting is the new blogging, I said, okay, well, how can I create an SEO podcast that isn't just a repeat of everything else that's out there in the marketplace? In my kind of unique value proposition and angle, because I am really, really incredibly fascinated by it, is understanding how people get into the industry, because we kind of, for the most part, if you've been in the industry for a while, you don't really mean to get into the industry. You almost sort of fall into it from somewhere else. And I find those origin stories incredibly fascinating. And then not only that, I also find the day-to-day life, what it's like to be an SEO, kind of the trials and tribulations component, incredibly interesting as well. And I think our podcast is really about humanizing what it's like to be an SEO. And anybody that's listening to it, there's, I think, how SEOs maybe talk to clients or talk to teams that they're working with. And then there's how SEOs talk to each other. And this podcast is almost like being a fly on the wall, listening to SEOs talk to each other, and kind of what we really say and what we really talk about. So that is the first leg of the stool. The second leg of the stool is SEO news. So we talk over the news of the day, whatever it may be. A lot of times it's just small updates. Sometimes it's big updates. And a lot of times it's Jeff being level-headed and me just yelling and complaining about things. And that's what that has become. Not sure we'll keep it in season 3, but for season 2, it's been a staple. And then the third leg of the stool, later on in the episode, we've been going into different deep dives on different topics. And today's deep dive is going to be website migrations and all of the challenges that entails. So if you stick around towards the end of the episode, we will be talking about website migrations. But without further ado, we're going to allow me to stop talking, and Bartosz, you're on. So I guess tell us your story. How did you get into SEO? Who are you as a person? Okay. What do people need to know about you?
I'm, as a typical SEO guy, I'm going to start with a question. Why do you call that page 2?
Ooh, that is a good question. Honestly, when I started the podcast 1.5 years ago, and if the listeners can't see, I'm going to describe the wall in my office behind me, because it says a lot about me. So on the wall, there's a little bit of artwork right behind me, and it is Godfather 1, Godfather 2, Goodfellas, and what's the other one? Casino. So the common theme from all of those is that they are mob movies. So I'm a huge fan of mob movies, and hugely I'm a history buff too. So I actually know a lot more than I should about mob and mafia history, which is weird. And when I was first trying to think of a name for the podcast, I thought a cool theme might be where's the best place to hide a body? The second page of Google search results. And I was like, oh, well, maybe it would be cool to be called Page 2, the Page 2 podcast. And what's funny about it is we created the Page 2 podcast. And then 6 months later, and I kicked myself because I didn't buy page2podcast.com.
And seriously?
Yeah, believe me. 6 months later, a church, literally in like Midwest America somewhere, decided to also create a podcast called the Page 2 Podcast. And I emailed them and said, guys, I have my podcast name 6 months before you. You got the domain. And they basically said, tough luck. So now there are 2 Page 2 podcasts. And when I thought in season 2, should we change the name? I was like, hell no, I'm an SEO. I'm just going to outrank them. So that's kind of where it came from. Just a creative play on my love of mob movies and tying in SEO somehow.
Yeah. Oh, you're actually ranking first for that. So that's something. You're not being overranked by a church.
Yes.
Our biggest competition is our biggest competition is Page 2 of everyone else's podcast. Because you can just be like the cooking podcast, but you use WordPress, and then Page 2 ends up being.
I didn't think about that when I was naming it. Sorry.
No, it's funny. I didn't think about it until you do a search and you're like, oh, everything's like we show up, top of all the pages, but then you start getting into it, and it's like, what does this podcast have to do with us? Oh no, it's just Page 2 of someone else's podcast.
So
my hope is that they eventually just let their domain expire, and I can swoop in and just buy it, but that hasn't.
Do you have an option set? You need to set an option for
them. I think they got auto.
So once it
on, yeah.
But okay, but just tracking mention for your podcast must be difficult. Anyhow, now that I know that, starting with how I got into that, so I'll lead with the worst part. So I'm a master's of psychology, so I'm not really a typical IT person who I don't have any technical background, but at the same time I feel like talking to other SEOs that most of them don't, and it was a total I guess like with most people it was a total coincidence that I got into SEO. So in the very beginning I was just helping my wife. She was a lingerie photographer for like Maxim and Playboy and a lot of magazines, just like 12 years ago and maybe 10 years ago, and I was helping her out to rank her website. And soon enough, I realized that SEO in Poland is not that complicated, and it's far from the what Google imagined SEO to be. So we did the right thing in 2010-11. We went into affiliate market, and we lived with my now ex-business partner Wojtek from Elevate. We did quite a lot of cool things. We had a lot of websites in the, oh my God, this is being recorded, in some spaces, one of those being casinos, the other one being finances and like paid-in loans and whatnot, and I won't mention the other ones, but we got very successful with some of those queries.
I mean, we had Ian Howells on, and he definitely did affiliate sites in those unmentionable areas of the internet. Yeah. So we're not immune to talking about that.
Oh, so we were top one for queries like life sex. We had some of those affiliate pages where you just buy a domain and they build a website for you, which is a shitty website, and all you need to do is just build links. So like 8 XRAMers, like 8 million links per 5 minutes. We actually counted that. So it was verified links. So that was like crazy old times. I think that 2010, the term white hat SEO, I don't think you could even Google that at that point to find the real meaning of that. But with my first kid, I figured, it's time to grow up a little bit, Bartosz, not to live with websites that, rank for a month and die, and a new one comes in. And I figured that Black Hat is not really it for me. And I was literally the first guy in Poland to ever say that in the SEO space. So we've created this brave idea that we're going to be the first white hat SEO agency in Poland back then. which led to a lot of enemies in this niche in Poland as well. So after a few years, we basically went out to only do English-speaking market SEO, which turned out to be difficult being a Polish agency. I remember Bartosz was, when I was talking about some updates with him, emailing Barry some of the examples of network in Poland that died. We actually wrote an article about Polish networks, and Barry wrote that Bartosz's network dropped. So there was a lot of I don't blame anyone, but Poland was known for extreme black hat back then. And in 2013, there was this Expedia drop, this massive drop. Expedia lost most of the traffic, and we worked very close with Christoph Kemper and Link Research Tools that were on fire in 2013-14 because of all the penguins and manual penalties. And I've managed to swoop in and write a 110 pages case study of what happened to Expedia, because everyone was like, this is negative SEO, they're being somehow attacked. And this article, I didn't sleep, I was just writing this straight for 2 or 3 days. This article got so viral that this was our gateway out of Poland in a way, which doesn't sound right when I say that. Anyhow, that was our gateway to actually talking to the clients from the US and basically all the English-speaking markets. It was picked up by the USA Today, by Forbes. It was extremely, extremely viral because it explained that Expedia did a lot to lose their rankings. For example, they had WordPress team with links in the footer. They did all the creative stuff that was, again, very popular in 2012. Now it sounds terrible, how could Expedia do that? But in 2012, 2013, I think you remember that this was very close to white hat with widgets. That was widely acceptable, let's say that. So we spent probably 1 or 2 years doing link audits, cleanups, recoveries for a while. And I think around 2014-15, we got hooked on technical SEO. We got really hooked on that. We saw results from that, and it was completely new. So no one actually believed that you can do just technical SEO without links. But we figured, this is a very, very small niche, but at the same time, it's extremely exciting. There are so many options. The only crawler back then was Screaming Frog. Then there was Deep Crawl. And then we used onpage.org in German using Google Translate to see which pages are what they actually mean. And that was exciting as well until 2016. And I'm getting to the end of that. We wrote a Hulu case study, and we found out that there is some kind of problem in Google with JavaScript. And this turned out to be another explosion because in the SEO community, because Hulu lost traffic just because they migrated to, I think, Angular, don't remember, one of the JavaScript frameworks, and they've lost all the traffic. And that was so, I want to say funny, but probably not for them. But if you wanted to watch, for example, casual TV show only available on Hulu in 2016-17, you would find only torrents. So you couldn't find Hulu. Torrents would rank top 1, top 2, the whole first page of results were torrents. So that was rough. You wanted to watch your show, that wasn't good. Google didn't really understand what happened at that time. And our experiment and research was appreciated by Googlers, by John Miller. They started talking about that, and this led to a whole new episode in our business as well. So we dove even deeper into JavaScript SEO, into web performance, critical rendering paths, and all that to actually split with Elevate, which was originally my company with Wojtek. Elevate was doing content marketing and technical SEO, And this was very difficult to communicate those two things because one was extremely geeky, the other one was creative. So we've decided, okay, we're going to split that into two different brands. And actually, Wojtek is sitting, you guys listening to us don't see that, but he's sitting like behind the wall and behind me. So we're still in the same office, but we rebranded to Onely. So there's onely.com, which is what we do, technical SEO, and Elevate with content marketing. And that's more or less the story. I try to make it quick, but in general, we're seeing even more JavaScript SEO problems now. But the problem we're having with that, and this is something to I guess, to talk about as well. The problem we're having is that this topic is very not sexy. Like, not too many people care about geeking out with like JavaScript SEO, with critical rendering path optimization and so on, and you don't hear too many like topics like that on an SEO conference, or those topics rarely trend on Twitter because they are very, very geeky.
Yeah. So one thing that I find really interesting, and I think the topic of JavaScript SEO for our audience is incredibly relevant, but for maybe other audiences, you're right, it is super, super geeky. But you'll be happy to know that we do internal SEO training for newer team members or people that are newer to SEO. And probably 4 to 6 weeks ago, we did a session on JavaScript. And I say that because of a couple of things. If you look at the site Built With, and you look at the trends over the course of time for different JavaScript languages like React, Angular, or Vue, and you look at how they have grown in terms of their adoption over the course of like the last 4 to 5 years, it's not even like they've grown 100%. It's like they've grown like 1,000%.
Yeah, like a hockey stick charts for most of those. Yeah,
unreal. And I think the other thing, and why I say this is really interesting, is in our presentation, we pulled the table that you had developed as part of your article around Bing and JavaScript adoption for Screaming Frog. We pulled your table and we used it in our training. So thank you for that table. I will say I have, in working working with a couple of JavaScript related sites, Bing, even still, like the adoption from a search engine standpoint is still surprisingly lagging behind. Obviously, Google is the leader when it comes to adoption and acceptance of JavaScript indexing. And I know because more and more sites are moving to JavaScript, it's an incredibly relevant, but it's a little bit of a difficult topic because there is still the opportunity, especially if you get a lot of traffic from other search engines, to lose a significant amount of visibility. So anytime that I have a conversation with a client who has moved or is considering moving to JavaScript, it's always here's how you do it correctly, and here is the risk analysis if you really fuck it up, or even if you do it correctly, there might still be some risk, as with any big migration. And we can talk about that part later, but it is incredibly relevant, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But this is the problem. I guess all of the SEOs have, and I guess this is a podcast for SEO. So this is something we all struggle with. That for us, we quite often preach to the choir with a lot of the topics. So we getting our message outside of the SEO community, and this is something we struggle with on a daily basis, is so difficult. Like explaining that this is important to like e-commerce crowd, which is our target group, is something we struggle with. We went through a lot of different strategies, but getting them hooked on, like, guys, Walmart is only 60% indexed in Google. This is why. Even this is sometimes a little bit too complex of a thought. So I guess I love that SEOs are getting hooked on the JavaScript SEO web performance even more. But I think our challenge as a SEO community is to somehow bring that message to non-techies, non-tech crowd.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim to be incredibly successful when it comes to translating that message. One thing, especially on the e-commerce side, that has been really effective for me is, quite honestly, just saying this is the dollars and cents. If you lose 40% of your traffic because you screw up a transition to JavaScript, here's how much money that's going to take out of your pocket. And not all clients have that kind of data. So in some cases, it's purely theoretical and speculating. But that's been effective for me when we've had e-commerce sites thinking about moving over to like a single page app or something of that nature, because developers are moving that way. And unfortunately, like I said, search engines are just trailing behind.
So this is an interesting thought, Jacob. So I'm trying to make this theory more popular, and I'm failing, but I'll try again, obviously, because why not? I think that once Google gets really good at rendering JavaScript, Bing is going to completely be like out of the game. They couldn't afford it. If you look at the scale of like few percent, maybe some countries, I don't know, let's give Bing 10%. By the way, I love Bing. I have nothing against them, but just the problem is that from technological standpoint, like how do you compete? You're Bing. Google is spending like trillions of dollars, probably less than that, to render all the JavaScript online, which we saw at scale is just we played with maybe a quarter of percentage of that, and this is expensive as hell. Yeah. So this is. I think we're gonna see some fluctuations in the marketplace of search engines with that. Like Hulu is a good example. They completely dropped out of Bing. Google finally like caught up to index them. But for example, Angular's website in JavaScript, it was never in Bing, but it was ranking very well in Google. So we're gonna see more and more of those websites completely excluded from non-Google search engines.
Do you think that Google is? I mean, obviously they're almost a monopoly, but if things were equal, do you think that Google is ahead right now because they're able to spend more money, or because they're further ahead technologically speaking?
So this is complex because we've talked to both Bing about JavaScript indexing and Google. And from my standpoint, looking at, for example, Bing switching the browser they use from Internet Explorer to Chrome, I feel like Bing at some point needs to admit that they are just trying to catch up in more and more desperate terms. I feel like Google really, first of all, I can only imagine it's money, but talking quite a bit to Martin Split, it's just me and Tomek Rudzki, we try to engage with their findings quite a bit. They really try to, like Google really tries to index all the JavaScript on scale within literally few months, and they have their up and downs. Recently, we see more downs, but I feel like this is a little bit of both. First, it's technology. Obviously, Google has more engineers and more resources. I'm imagining. I don't know. So, just to answer that, I feel like I'm gonna go with money. What do you win? Like, was it a quiz?
Yes.
I'm assuming that Google is going to win that because of all the cash they're going to pump into the rendering.
Yeah, I think last week when we were talking to Alita, we were like talking about YouTube, and it's like one of those things where it just takes so much money to make something like a YouTube that who can compete, and it's like I'm sure someone may come around sometime, but I feel like Google just has. Having all this money, being such a big, rich company, really focusing on search is like their life. They know they need to get better at the JavaScript side of things. Google does a really great They have a really great ability of like, there's some really bad developers out there and they've spent their life trying to decipher bad code for so long. So JavaScript, I think, is just one of those because there's so many. Like when you have to download 4 megabytes worth of JavaScript to have your page render, and Google needs to crawl millions of these pages. I can see them having, why it's delayed, why it takes longer. I mean, besides just rendering it in general, you're having so much more of these files you have to download. Just when I noticed it on some of my clients, like I literally just did a performance report, and every page had at least 8 megabytes of JavaScript, CSS, and images that are like 3 things that are on the site. So we wanted to make sure that we cleaned all that up and moved forward with it. But I can just imagine Google right now, like just all the junk that's out there, them trying to digest it and actually rank it. It's insane. So
just to finish this thought, because Jacob is winking at me that we need to move forward, and there is a Godfather poster behind him, so that's scary as fuck. But just to finish this thought, I still sometimes we get really into the details of things, but looking at Google in general, at how fast they're moving with implementing, let's say that the rendering JavaScript is a product, so how fast they as a large organization, they can implement new things, they address new problem. And working with a lot of enterprise clients, we cannot really get close to that pace with like things that are, I'm guessing, 1,000 times smaller. So we need to really give both Bing and Google benefit of a doubt that they live in an extremely dynamic scenario, because JavaScript exploded like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, more or less, and they couldn't really see that coming on such scale, or maybe they could, don't know. Yeah, but sorry. Jacob, we're ready for the next topic.
Well, one last thought. Anytime I think of Google these days, especially when we talk about the scale or how badly they're beating other search engines, or when they're occasionally evil, like the Star Wars Empire music is playing, like at least in the background of my mind. And as a student of history, like part of me wonders between Google and Amazon, who are like the 2 behemoths in every market these days almost. I just wonder at what point governments start declaring them a monopoly and break them up into smaller companies, like what was done to like the Fords of the world in the early 1900s. So like, if this isn't a monopoly, like I don't know what is. So I don't know, between this and Amazon.
Microsoft actually was kind of split apart. I don't think it was government. I think the government was looking to split them apart, but when they went with their hardware models, they had their gaming model, then I think they made like Windows its own division. So they tried to break it apart themselves. But I could see, and Google I think slowly did that, right? Where now there's Alphabet, and then Google's part of Alphabet, and then so is like self-driving cars is part of it. So they are, even though we think of it all as Google, they have internally separated so that they can kind of say like, hey, we're not a monopoly because we have these separated.
We're not a monopoly, wink, wink, right.
But I feel like this is very rough if you have like a job listing website right now, or a flight website or whatever. Like Google is going to kill you within the next few years, whether you like it or not. So this is rough for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, and it's like a double-edged sword. And to use another Godfather reference, in the book Godfather, they describe the character of Al Neri, who before he became a hitman, and this is probably TMI, was a police officer. And he described being a police officer and the general public being both your ward as well as your prey. You protect them, but you also looking at them as potential criminals. And so I think of Google in sometimes the same way, where I thank them for enabling people like me to have a job. But at the same time, I see them slowly but surely getting a little bit more evil and taking a little bit more of my space and the space of other people who depend on big sites like that to themselves have a job, taking a little bit of that away day by day. So it's a little disheartening. Anyways, let's move on to the news. Jeff, what is in the news?
Oh, Google. They're in the news again.
Really?
No.
Let's talk about coronavirus, all right?
Oh,
Let's
this is with conferences, with SEO conferences, coronavirus is really
and that was actually going to be one of my topics.
Complicated. Yeah. I just had a conversation about that with the SEO Oktoberfest Facebook group. There's like most of those people are speakers, because I struggle with should I even try to book those conferences this year, because next week I speak in Slovenia. There's I think 1,000 people supposed to be. I'm not sure if they're gonna show up in one room. I'm probably my geography may be wrong. 100 kilometers from northern Italy. With the biggest outbreak in Europe. So looking at all that, I know a lot of conference organizers are struggling quite a bit right now. So I think a lot of people in the SEO space, if you organize a conference, now everyone cancels, I think this can kill even a large thriving company, because then if you lose 2,000 people with €1,000 per ticket, this is not easy. But from me, it's just I'm okay flying. I don't think I'm in the biggest risk zone of just dying from it. But at the same time, we're gonna be talking to empty rooms. So this is a very business problem. I also don't want my team to fly somewhere, because I don't want to put them at risk. So there are so many different problems. But the biggest business problem for me is I know for a fact that a lot of enterprises, if not most, they have those memos of no flights unless it's super urgent, and work from home. So even if you're going to go to a conference now, you won't be having any enterprise people in the room, because they are banned from conference and flying. So I think it's going to, and also we lost 2 big contracts with travel companies, because they we signed the contract, sent it to them, they paused it last minute. First time in our history, because they said nothing's happening within our business, because it's travel, it's high season, but we're not seeing anything. So we're going to pause everything until it settles down. So I think it's slowly creeping onto the SEO niche as well.
I think it's creeping everywhere. We, on our side, I've had 2 instances recently with clients that I work on where there's been a direct impact trickling down. One is heavily involved in a very large fitness convention, and I think would be classified as a convention where they are not allowing, and it's a massive convention, and they are not allowing spectators to come in and watch the athletes compete. So the athletes are still there, but they're just competing now in empty rooms. And it's
that's terrible.
Right. And this is a massive, almost a spectacle. And I don't want to say which one it is, but I mean, there are only a few really well-known fitness conventions in the world, and this is one of them. And then the other one was a client came to us the other day and said, hey, we're making some changes to our homepage, and unfortunately, we're going to replace your SEO copy with coronavirus messaging. And what am I supposed to say to that? Am I supposed to say no? Don't do that. I was like, well, you got to do what you got to do. Risks be damned, because this is impacting people's lives. So said, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do.
You behave very, very professionally in that department. We are supposed to be at an expo somewhere in the world with 5,000 to 7,000 people in the room, and we told them, guys, it's in May. We don't really want to do that anymore because of the virus outbreak. And we got this lawyer kind of email that we need to pay 100% if we cancel, and the event is happening. And we're like, in May, how do you want to do that? So a lot of businesses are trying to, threaten you into coming to that conference, which is, I think, the least ethical thing to do. So Agreed. We're going to be seeing some of that as well. They're desperate, I guess.
No, they have to be desperate, because, as you were saying, 2,000 people at $1,000 a ticket. That's, there are a lot of conferences that I think just are barely breaking even, or maybe, not making a ton of money. I know in Raleigh in the USA,
J.R. Oaks and the Raleigh group were putting on a findability conference, and I'm not sure what the decision was yet for that, but it's a brand new conference, right? Put on by some really smart SEOs, but it's as your first time, right? It's just like a really bad situation there. Me and Jacob's company, we do a ton of analytics work. So we are one of the premier sponsors of the Adobe Summit. And now Adobe Summit is 100% going to be online, which actually might be good because it might be my first time I get to watch some Adobe Summit stuff because I usually don't go to that. But it is something that I think you're going to see a lot of conferences now be online and streamed. And I know there's a couple SEO or even like marketing conferences that are only online, and I see that as like kind of a potential market these days of just having like kind of like an online conference.
The problem, no one's going to pay that kind of money for an online conference, right? Because there are a lot of things that you get from the offline conference, like networking, right? Contacts, like everything. So like SMX Advanced, SMX West, SMX, all the SMXs in these days, they're quite large. SMX Munich happening next week with almost 2,000 people. I'm guessing they, for them, that's also going to be rough to have to cancel, postpone, or move things around, and so on. So I feel like this is going to be the first thing, but also I think if you work with like travel clients and whatever, it's gonna be slowly affecting the business here as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. I guess in other news besides Corona, Google is actually moving. So I actually thought they all were already 100% mobile first indexed, but that's because all my clients are mobile first indexed. But they're saying by September in 2020 that 100% of the internet will be mobile first indexing, which I think is no shocker. They were moving that way. It's just one of those where it's kind of like a warning to everybody if you're not mobile compliant.
But this is no shocker, but at the same time, look how slow the SEO community is catching up with that. If you want to crawl a website, mobile crawler, not like there are a lot of big brands crawlers that don't really support that yet. And if you have a mobile first website and you use a crawler, I won't name any because I like them. But if you're using an X crawler that's just doing desktop or doing desktop with JavaScript, that's amazing. But then the mobile graph, and we played with that because I think that I know that Write is doing that. We crawled that with Write. We compared mobile versus desktop. Those are two completely different graphs, different links, like different websites. And to this day, I think that Write implemented that a few months back. But to this day, it's very difficult to crawl your website with a cloud. I know that like Screaming Frog is supporting that for a while, but I'm talking about those big cloud ones. So we are often analyzing a different website that Google is. So these are like very basics that we need to look into.
No, agreed. And I wish that I could easily compare the two crawls. Like actually just say crawl the site, it'll crawl it mobile first, then crawl it as desktop, and then be able to compare if there was any differences, because you are right. Like just the way the link structures go on a lot of mobile sites, maybe the mobile version isn't as crawlable. And I think I fall to that a lot where we'll just set the crawl, let it go, and usually it's desktop, right? So I need to kind of reset my configurations a lot of times to say like, we're mobile first. We need to crawl this as if we were, a Samsung.
We've also realized that like mid last year, which was late anyways, because like I'm guessing right now that like I'm not 100% sure, but like 100% of our clients are mobile first. We had one. That was moved a few months back. So I think now it's 100%. And we were still using desktop crawlers as well, like because there is no really an option. So I feel like once Google is now going to say that, I feel like this is going to make it a little bit easier for all the, for example, software companies in the SEO space. Okay, we only look at the mobile version, because if you want to go with the desktop one, that's fine. This is something you can do as an extra step to make sure that you're technically okay, but not strictly for the SEO reasons.
I mean, I think in fairness to us as SEOs, like there are a fair amount of, probably more often than not, a site has made the transition to responsive. So you can probably, crawl it any way you want, and it's mostly the same site except for maybe the visual appearance. I do find that I am shocked a little bit with the slow adoption on the part of some sites as well as some tools with respect to mobile, because I think responsive came out in like 2010 or 11. I think it's just, this has been building and coming for some time. So like, if this is a shock to anybody, like, I don't know what rock you've been living under, to be honest.
That's true. We had like, I have this slide somewhere from first years of Google, like that, when I think Sergey Brin is talking in Japan to a journalist saying that they are making sure that Google works on those old mobiles with just black and white screens, like Nokia's or whatever, and I think it was like 1998 or something like that, and they were looking into that. Google was looking into that 20 years ago, or like somewhere in this ballpark. I often use that slide just to show how old mobile first is.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too. Like, as an ex-developer, I would always recommend kind of like the whole progressive enhancement. So whether it came to JavaScript or whether it came to mobile or anything, like I always developed a site like just HTML first. So if you took away my JavaScript and took away my CSS, you could still read the website. And I think a lot of that is actually still valid today, where we just don't want to have a ton of code that's put in there and kind of build up from the least common denominator. But I think the WAP devices and old devices aren't the least common denominator anymore.
Thank you. I was looking for that word. WAP. Oh my god.
I think we don't have to worry about those as much anymore. Even though we don't want to be. We don't want to test our sites on like 4G connections or 5G connections and say like, hey, this is what everyone sees. At the same time, I think WAP or those black and white screens are far
that's
way
true, but
gone now. So it's
they're definitely way gone. But this is like 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
This is like if you look at like a time perspective, how long we had to prepare to see that coming. This shows that a lot of big brands not being 100% mobile friendly. This is rough.
Agreed. So I guess another thing in the news that Google just, I think Barry Schwartz put it out there, but Google has been tightening up their just schema recommendations on how like some of their markup guidelines would be. And the latest one that came out was with FAQ schema. And in a nutshell, the too long didn't read version is that you only should have FAQ schema for one question and one answer on only one page of your website. What that means is like one question per page. If you use that same question on 20 different pages, don't put schema on 19 of those pages. Only put it on the one that you like, I guess the canonical version that you would like. I know a lot of websites have it, and I actually just ran into one where they put down the bottom of their page like links to their schema or links to their questions, but they would show like the 10 latest questions, and those 10 questions all had schema on every single page. Even though it changed when like a new question got added to it, there was just tons of duplicate schema throughout the whole site. So today that Google, that would be a no-no. And though I don't think you'll get a penalty, Google's probably still going to pick the canonical one.
I want to touch on that. We see more schema penalties over the last few years than manual penalties for links, like the ones you remember in good old times. So we actually were surprised that actually we saw, I think, maybe 4 or 5 schema penalties for usually wrong use, not like some kind of abuse of that. But also looking at the search results, people play with those for all kinds of reasons. So I think like, there's this black hat mentality in us somewhere that, looking at some of the websites, like guys, how are you gaining maybe like 0.5% of clicks with that, with different stars on a listing that has nothing to do with reviews and whatnot. Right. So I feel like Google is slowly going to have to clean this up, but I wouldn't expect this to be a significant change in how we do SEO.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, this whole FAQ schema for me is a little bit of like an open wound, and I say that because we had a client where we had been making progress on a particularly important query, and lately, because of just internal issues with that client, we've been kind of struggling to get over the hump. And then we've watched one of our competitors who was in roughly the same position at the same time we were about a year ago, has just grown and grown and grown and grown. And they do have a really, really great website, and they've grown to the point where they're like their top position, and watching them do that work and just wishing like, gosh, that could have been us, because we knew that particular important query was there for the taking, is a little bit of salt in my wound. But then when I was doing some competitive research on that particular competitor, they are using FAQ schema. So not only are they ranking well and beating the crap out of us, they're using the FAQ schema just to like spike the football right on my head and taking up a lot of extra real estate in the search result. And it's just salt in my wound. So every time that I see them there, I'm like, you sons of bitches, I want to do that too. I want to do that too, because of their FAQ schema. But now that Google is tightening this up, I may just go do a little audit of their site and see if they're maybe using it inappropriately. Yeah. May go actually
evil.
Their FAQs.
You're evil.
Very evil.
I do not compete.
I'm a sore loser.
And I think the majority of schema fraud comes from like reviews and things like that, where I did have clients who wanted me to put schema. They wanted star reviews on like their category pages or brand category pages.
Oh, this happens a lot.
You're a site that sold Nike. Yeah. And they
really obnoxious.
So at one time I tried it. I was like, hey, let me see like what we can do. Like the customer actually, or client actually requested, can we get star reviews for these type of pages? And I'm like, let's find out. And I think this was before like there were schema penalties. And we might have got some stars, but nothing really major happened. Like we didn't get tons of click-throughs because of it or anything like that. Though I would love to see now if they still stuck with that and if they got a penalty from it. But I'm no longer at that company where we did that at. But at the same time, I think it's like I always feel like I want to do things properly and not necessarily do things spammy. And maybe that makes me not the greatest SEO pushing things, but it comes back from my development years of like every tag has a meaning. It's like I don't need to put 17 H1s inside of a paragraph to be able to try to rank, because it's to me it doesn't make sense. Right. And I feel at the end of the day, like make it understand easy for Google. And it's like they're way smarter than I am. So any dumb thing I come up with to try to trick them, they're going to figure it out eventually. And unless I want to do a churn and burn site. And I have played with that. Like I one time I was like, let me put 5 affiliate sites up and see what like the Black Hat World does. And we did really great. But then when Panda and Penguin came out, and actually I probably would have been tempted way more if Penguin and Panda didn't come out, because some of my sites were like I was making like $1,000, $2,000 just as a side automated blog. That was great. And then once they got taken down, then it was like, great. Now I had content to write about the negative sides and how I use that actually in a lot of my presentations of like, here's how great automation can be, just like automating content, automating stuff. This is what happens. And it just literally everything went down to zero. Google de-indexed all my sites. And I was like, I don't feel like rebuilding all this. And it was fun while it lasted. But I feel that way with like any type of schema or any type of things that you're trying to just squeeze that extra out of the site to get there. I think it eventually is going to backfire and you're going to lose way more than what you started with.
Sounds like your Wikipedia career.
This is something that we can bridge somehow towards the migration topic, which I think is going to make Jacob happy at the same time. Because we're very alike, Jeff, with we also get a lot of requests from clients, like they are doing that, they're not penalized, let's do that as well. And we are usually, saying like a very strong no, let's not go this way. Like, after our Black Hat days, I think we've got all that out by like 2013. And but for us, the biggest problem is that that conversation with like client is saying like every month they're stealing our traffic with those spammy things. But at the same time, I feel like we live in times when this is not as beneficial, but it's not helping them as much as they would expect. As you said, like those spammy schemas, they won't give you 3% revenue more. They will just be there, so maybe give you tiny bit more clicks. But again, I'm not really thinking this is a major thing. And moving to migration, this is very, very similar, because for us, often migrating multi-million websites, sometimes we do like a website that's 200 million, 400 million pages. People try to cut costs at different points of that process, because it's still, migration from business point of view is quite painful for clients, because they need to usually do like new CMS. There's always not enough people. The marketing is not on top of everything because there are so many loose ends. And then we're like, okay, we need to really prepare for like 1 month in advance. So before you migrate, let us know. We usually get those emails like, we're migrating tomorrow. And this is...
That's scary.
You probably had those. Like, I'm guessing we're not the only ones. You had those, like, we've decided we're doing that in like 3 days. We're like, this is a little bit late for...
How are you running your organization is what I usually ask when they do that. But I just ask that to myself. I don't really...
Admit, guys, this happened to you. This happened to you. We had so many of those that...
Oh, yeah.
It's to the point where like I feel the need when clients start talking to me about, hey, I'm thinking of a migration to a different domain, or I'm thinking of a replatform, or I'm thinking of a redesign. And to me, all of those three things kind of fit together, and I view them as one thing. And the biggest question that I have is, when is it happening? Because for me, like, I feel like, especially the bigger the site, the more time you need to plan to prepare. And especially if there are a significant number of pages and a significant amount of revenue on the line, like 6 to 12 months is my bare minimum in terms of planning, doing things like redirect mapping, working on the architecture, especially if it's changing, and just working with the client to get all of the loose ends tied up. And if it's going to be done more quickly than that, I personally have to step back and question, like, what are they doing as a business and why? Because it's a lot of risk to undertake when you try to do it willy-nilly like that.
We ask that question, like, maybe not how do you run your business, but we ask our clients, like, why are you telling that now? And there is always one reply, and they always assume that this is not that much work. And I think explaining this process, even though if you Google that, there are probably there is a lot of good content from Aleida. We even have a webinar with SEMrush that like 3 weeks ago with Arsen and Aleida. If you Google that, I think that right now internet is flooded with info. Okay, how to do migration, when to prepare for migration. I just think that they have, first of all, a lot on their heads. So the clients, they usually struggle with so many things. And then there comes an SEO agency saying that they need a few $1,000 to make it work. And they're like, this is just mapping links. And if we go through that process, I know there are few different ways, but we usually, first of all, obviously crawl the website and list all of the URLs, so we have some kind of data dump of that. But we also scrape Google with the brand queries, because there are a lot of orphan pages, maybe some old,
Right.
usually if the website is older, like if you would do that for, I'm guessing, I know, Coca-Cola, I'm guessing they have old URLs from like 3 versions of the website ago that are not redirecting anywhere. So we scrape Google
Right.
with like, this requires proxy and time and different footprints to make it happen. So even everything you need to do before they push the red button in the development room, not sure how it goes. Anyhow, if the developers start the migration, do you need at least a week? But if the website is large, if you have like, again, 10 million, 50 million, even the crawler, it requires like a week or 2 sometimes to go to the page. So this is all, I think this is the biggest problem, biggest pain point, again, to communicate that process to the client. And did you guys have, and this is a quiz from my end, did you guys have clients who migrated, dropped, and reached out to you with like a large website?
Yes, definitely. I have one of my clients that I've been with for the last 4.5 years started off as, hey, we launched our website 6 months ago on Hybris. It was an e-commerce site, and we lost $9 million or $6 million or something like that within a year, or within that 6 months. They brought us in, and it took us 6 months to start turning things around. So one, it was like the first couple of months was just getting everything they needed to do. They had complete buy-in, which was great. But then once you get everything implemented, it took like, you're now 8 months, 9 months into negative. So it took Google a little while to actually get through the site because it was so large. Finally, we're crushing it, and it finally moved up there. And it was 100% technical. Like, we didn't do anything content-wise. We did 100% technical, and that was kind of funny when my first time on this podcast with Jake, like, he gave us like some, like, what is your kind of advice or tips? And some of mine was like, you can increase traffic and rankings without doing any bit of content. Not on every site, but on e-commerce sites, there are so many crawl blockers that happen, and we really...
That's the definition of what we do. We don't do any content, only technical SEO.
Exactly.
And
we said that to Elephant.
Exactly. We'll leave that to Elephant. But if you have 100 pages, probably we are not the best fit. But if you have a large structure, there is always so much traffic to gain from that.
Exactly.
But coming back to migrations, there are also changes in how Google approaches migrations, something that's not really discussed about that much. But with Panda and Penguin, if you Google that, this is an embarrassing article, but we had this Orca technique that's going to kill Penguin from like 2014. My content wasn't gold back then. Anyhow, if you got hit by Penguin, and there was, remember, that period of 2 years before the next Penguin update once, I don't remember which years that was exactly, but it was 2 years between Penguins, or 1.5 year, like a long time. We came up that if you redirect or rebrand, basically change domains, that goes away. If you have a very good disavow file, and if you do that correctly, it goes away. So the whole, I think 2014, 15, give or take, was our year of doing like tens of those rebrands/redirects that were somehow around Penguin. So this article got us a lot of that business. But then I think 2016, we had Peabody case study. If you Google Peabody case study, it's published on right.com. We had a very interesting case study of a coupon website that had 24 different countries back then, even more now, but they had 24 different countries, 24 different domains. And, as an SEO, I had a call with them. I was like, guys, you need to merge that into one domain. And they said, okay, which never happened to me before.
Right.
So then I was like, oh, fuck, this is happening. And we did it within first 2 weeks. We migrated, I think, 12 or something like that, and then whole 24. Within a month, the traffic for the whole organization got, I think, 10 or 20 times bigger within just that period of time. That was 2016. That was amazing. And we had a lot of clients that wanted to do that again with a lot of brands, a lot of domains. We even had one with 120 domains in 120 countries. It was amazing until 2017, when Google at some point said, okay, guys, this is not going to work anymore. So we had one very big client. We're halfway through migration, and we're saying, okay, this doesn't work as like tens of migrations we did before. And starting in 2017-ish, we couldn't replicate that. So if you have those rebrands or migrations, they usually take a few months now. Back then, and if you look at the case study, you will see the charts. Within a week from changing the domain, you would have this massive boost of traffic that would somehow settle down, that would drop, but it still would end up being more traffic than you had. So that's also something that has changed, and that's what you're saying with the 6 months, that now Google, after migration, even if it's done perfectly fine, they need a little bit of time to catch up to where the traffic used to be. Sometimes we can do it, one-to-one within a month, but usually we see a tiny drop and then it recovers. So I think that the timeline of those is very exciting as well, of how Google is changing things, because we can't, right. Like, if people reach out to us from Peabody case study, like, do that for us, and we're like, oh guys, sorry, 3 years ago we would. But still, this is an exciting process.
Yeah, I always tell clients that, one, if you think of a website in terms of its life cycle, a migration, a redesign, a replatform, those don't come around very often. So they are very significant to relate it to a human, almost like life events, where they have the potential to really change things. And if you do it right, like long term, they can change things for the better, because you're obviously doing what you're doing for a reason. But in the short term, what I try to tell them is, hey, we might do everything technically right by the book, and you may still experience some degree of volatility for a time period afterwards, after everything launches and gets processed. And the hope is that eventually you get going back to the right direction. But I will never forget what a client once said to me as we were going through a replatform, and I've kind of carried it with me. He said, okay, after we launch, flat is the new up. And I've used that several times, because for me, the goal of a migration is getting things over in such a clean way that there's a limit to volatility afterwards. And when I've had clients where things weren't clean and things weren't well kept, and they didn't always follow my recommendations, that volatility was more severe or even significant declines in business. And for me, when things go well these days, it means nothing changes after the launch.
So I have a question because sure. I think we're running out of time for the migration topic. I have a question to both of you guys, because this is something that every single SEO has a different point of view at. We usually try to fix something along with the migration. So if it's a new platform, we work on staging, we try to improve things and then migrate. Do like new information architecture because we're redirecting anyways. But a lot of SEOs, and I think that point of view is valid as well, think like, okay, let's do migration first and let's tackle those things later, because then we can track, if something goes wrong, we can track that a little bit closer. Which, from my point of view, is not that needed, because if you look at that from technical standpoint, I think you will agree, for SEOs, migration is not that complex of a job. If you did it a few times, it's not like a high risk process from my standpoint. But I understand both point of views. So, which side are you on?
I'll tell you my side, because a lot of times it's not just a migration; it's paired with something else. It's paired with a replatform. Yes. It's paired with a redesign, and in a lot of cases, they're changing the architecture of their site, their main navigation, the look and feel. So there are a lot of moving pieces and parts. It's not always as black and white as I would like. To your point, if there are opportunities, because the hood doesn't come up very often sometimes when to allow us to get in and work on the car, so to speak. So if there are opportunities, speed is almost always a big opportunity. That takes a long time to fix with many clients. for whatever reason. I would say, like, yeah, we absolutely try to get in there and do some work to make the engine better. Sometimes because the developers or the brand just has, many different stakeholders with many different ideas of what needs to get done. Certain things don't get prioritized, not because we don't want them to, but just because they just aren't going to fit into whatever timeline they're being held to. But I generally agree with the philosophy of, if you can make improvements while you're under the hood, that's great. When I talk about parity, I mean parity of content. So as much as possible, make sure that you have similar or the exact same content pre and post, if not upgraded, or at least parity when it comes to your technical framework, and not taking steps back. For example, like if your site generally loads in 3 to 4 seconds, well, guess what? I would hope that after the migration, it doesn't go to like 9 or 10. Or if you've got certain pieces of content that are on your site as it stands today, well, I'd hope that they would be migrated over. Sometimes that happens too, where really important pages, for whatever reason, don't get migrated over. Even with SEOs going, we need this page, it just doesn't happen for one reason or another. So it's things like that worry me in the migration process, because in a lot of times it's, especially the bigger the business, there are just a lot of stakeholders and a lot of voices, and sometimes the SEOs in the room aren't always the voice at the front of the line.
Yeah, and I just want to get things set that I don't want to change later. I want my URLs set. I want my, kind of like templates to be as good as it can be for the launch. But I think even things like HTML we can tweak during, after the site launches. But things like URLs, like I don't want to touch again. Like once we touch them once, like, hey, if we can get the same. Like if we get the same URLs, great, if they're not bad to begin with. But a lot of times, like especially in e-commerce, we're going like, here's 37 parameters.
Anyways.
Yeah. So we'll be redirecting. Anyways, let's get it right this time. And this way we don't have to change it in the future. So if we can get that set up on the new site, it all depends on how much time we have, right? If we have 6 months, great. There's maybe a lot of things we can do. But if we are in that 1 month of thing where we need to get some stuff done, like I will really focus on URLs first and say, let's get those straight, because they're like the foundation. Anything else above that could be a mess. So, but awesome. So I kind of just wanted to move into like the final section, which is a question we ask all our guests. And this question is, if you were getting into SEO today, what would be like one piece of advice you would give to someone that is brand new into the industry?
So I would tell him or her, because actually our team is mostly women. So this is, I think that the technical SEO is that guys are not the best at the technical SEO sometimes. But anyhow, I would advise that person to first of all focus on one tiny thing. I think like with 2020 and even with how Google is looking at websites with Medic Update and all that, you need to specialize and own one part of whatever you're doing. So I would tell that person, if you're joining SEO, if you're starting with SEO, for example, technical SEO, pick one thing. For example, understand how rendering works in depth, because this is something that has enormous value. If you're not going to be working in a team, like at Onely, we can actually do that because we have a lot of people specialize in smaller things. If you're not going to do that, then start with understanding visibility trends, why something dropped, why something went up. Like I think like talking to SEOs, looking at a lot of articles online, people don't understand like search metrics, Hystrix, SEMrush, what happened, when it happened, why it happened. And I think this is the core skill. And I think this is so difficult to find that if you know that, you can easily write an article that's going to drive you business, a lot of business. Because if something happened, there are so many things that we just don't have the time to write about, but they're super exciting. So you will always find a website that lost traffic because of that, and they will really appreciate what you did, and you can help them out. So one of those two things, depending on if you're a part of the team or a freelancer, but definitely if you can specialize as much as possible, it has downs, as is with us, for example, communicating what we found out to e-commerce. Like, this is difficult, but in the end, your work, will defend itself. So specialize and understand how the traffic comes to a website, why visibility changes, and own like search metrics, Systrix, SEMrush, doesn't matter. You own that one tool to understand those trends.
Awesome. That's great. Where can people find you if they wanted to reach out?
Oh, just remember my surname. Just Google Góralewicz. Just joking. Go to onely.com or just search for Bartosz Góralewicz at Twitter or Facebook, whatever.
Sweet.
My name is pretty unique in the SEO industry, so you'll find me.
Yeah.
Or just, I'm guessing, click on some of the links or mentions in the description of this podcast.
I mean, you're almost on a level where you can, because you're the only Bartosz that I'm aware of, that you could just go by one name probably.
Oh, thank you. This is not the thing in Poland, but thank you.
In the US.
In the US, okay.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for coming on. It was a great discussion, and looking forward to letting our audience hear what we talked about.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure to watch Jeff's scary posters. Jacob's scary posters and Jeff's collection of very bizarre things on the wall behind him. Like, there is a guitar, drones, there is a TV. It's like Casey Neistat met Jeff. It's like a very, very complex. You need to include that screenshot somewhere so people can enjoy that amazing wall.
Some people use a green screen. I just overcomplicate my background.
It's good because I like throughout the whole episode I had something to focus on when so I can have a look at what's happening in the background.
That's awesome.
Oh, Jeff, man of many hobbies. All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Sign off.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Page 2 podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the show or listen to more episodes, visit us at page2podcast.fm. That's page, 2, podcast.fm. Our episodes are also available on a number of other platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Deezer, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, TuneIn, and more. Additionally, you can also listen to our show on our new YouTube channel. If you'd like to become a sponsor or would like to be interviewed, get in touch with us at thepage2podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, happy optimizing.